What is up, fight fans? This is DJC Combat, and today I'm going to be giving my breakdown and prediction for this weekend's pay per view, UFC 303, which has been completely changed up and refurbished. We went from McGregor, Chandler to now Pereira, Prochazka 2, like on short notice, which is just absolute chaos. And arguably a better, more interesting main event. I mean, any Connor fight's interesting, but on paper, Pereira, Jiri seems like a more competitive matchup. I mean, not to say Connor, Chandler can't be competitive, but I don't know. I just feel like with Connor coming off that 3 year layoff and the injury, and Chandler being a bit more active and being a bad matchup, I could have seen a world where, like, if anyone has a dominant showcase, it's Michael Chandler, where he goes out there and destroys the washed up Connor. But both these guys, Jiri and Pereira, are in their prime, and it should be an interesting one. But that's not the only fight we lost on here. I mean, Jamal Hill, Alberg is off. Alberg is off the card. He was supposed to fight Smith after Hill pulled out. Alberg pulled out. And now it's Smith versus Dolidze, a completely uninteresting matchup. And that they also added Ortega Lopes on here due to the fact that Hill pulled out, and I guess they didn't want to make this the co-main. Mayra Silva versus Macy Chiasson, and then Ian Garry versus Michael Venom Page. I don't understand why Ian Garry versus MVP can't simply be the co-main event. That's the next biggest fight on this card. This should be the co-main or feature fight, not Anthony Smith versus Roman Dolidze, but whatever. I'm going to kick this off with Michael Venom Page versus Ian Machado Garry. Man, this has been a very tough fight to call. It's a very interesting stylistic matchup because you got two really elite strikers in the welterweight division. And I'd say for each other, they're like the best strikers they'll have ever faced. MVP for Ian will be the best striker that Garry's ever fought, and for MVP, Ian Garry will be the best striker that Michael Venom Page has ever gone up against. And Ian Garry is a clear, huge step up from MVP's last opponent, Kevin Holland, which, let's be real, Kevin Holland, he's that fighter, that fun, exciting fighter who we all love to watch. He has some exciting fights, some exciting finishes here and there, but in reality, he's just not that good. He's not of that elite level that someone like Ian Garry is. So I do believe that this fight will be a tougher test for Michael Venom Page. You got the textbook striking of Ian Garry. Not very flashy, but effective with what he does. Whereas Michael Venom Page, very flashy, but also very unorthodox, very unpredictable. And this is actually a Muay Thai striker versus like a karate, taekwondo striker type of matchup. And usually it's always the Muay Thai strikers who seem to shine and do better against the karate strikers. Because Muay Thai guys are kick heavy, they'll go to the body, they'll go to the legs. And I could definitely see Ian Garry taking an approach where he targets the body of Michael Venom Page and the legs of MVP, doesn't really headhunt, and I could honestly see this being a very boring fight because Ian Garry sometimes will take that safety first approach in his fights where he'll do just enough to win, just enough to get by without taking damage. That's how he approached it against Jeff Neal. And I could easily see him taking that approach against MVP, whereas MVP is he's a lot more of a risk taker in his fights. He'll have a tendency to take more chances than Ian Garry, which honestly makes him more dangerous than Ian Garry. But, sometimes that could put MVP a little bit at risk of getting in trouble. We've seen that before in some fights that he's lost, like against Douglas Lima. But man, it's such a close fight. But I don't know, something tells me Michael Venom Page is going to get this done. I don't know why. I feel like this is a fight where Ian should win. Like, he should derail the hype of Michael Page, but I'm not getting those vibes. Like, what I see happening in this fight is Ian Garry is going to have a really hard time figuring out the timing and distance of Michael Venom Page. And Michael Venom Page, for a guy who's 36 years old, he still moves like someone who's 26. Like, he's still super fast. I think he's faster than Ian Garry. I think he's more powerful than Ian Garry. He's got the reach advantage over Ian Garry. And I just feel like Ian's going to be on the defense in this fight and not be as offensive or as pressuring as he needs to be. And I feel like from a distance, MVP can just tit for tat outstrike him, outkick him, outpunch him. And even when, Ian Garry's trying to throw leg kicks, MVP stance switches a lot. So I feel like it's going to be very hard for someone like Ian Garry to time a perfect leg kick on Michael Page, who's constantly moving, switching stances. And also, Michael Venom Page is very good when it comes to countering leg kicks over the top with punches. So I feel like how this fight's going to play out, it's going to be a situation where Ian invests a lot in the body and legs, but Michael Page has so much success outboxing Ian Garry, basically. I feel like he's going to win a majority of the punching exchanges and land more headshots, whereas Ian's going to land more leg and body. But I feel like when the fight goes the distance, the judges are going to count the head damage more than the leg damage of Ian. And I also kind of feel like Ian Garry's going to get hurt more in this fight, whereas MVP, I don't really see him getting hurt really at all against Ian Garry. Other than like the leg kicks, I really don't see any punches like rocking Michael Page. I feel like Michael Page might flash knock down Ian Garry in a few moments, like countering leg kicks, but Ian gets right back up. But then MVP is able to, win the rounds through knockdowns. So I'm going to say MVP wins this fight by unanimous decision, 29-28. Maybe Ian Garry by round 3 finally starts to kind of figure out MVP, but it's just a little bit too late, and MVP early on is just a step ahead. All right, now moving up the card, we got Mayra Bueno Silva versus Macy Chiasson. This is another fight where I had to do a lot of thinking because I could see how Macy could be a horrible matchup for Mayra Silva. She's bigger, she's taller, 5 inches taller, way longer reach. I think on paper her cardio is better. She's got more volume on the feet, very good footwork, very hard to track down and hit clean in the stand-up. But Mayra Silva, I think, has a power advantage. She's got very good, effective low kicks, which I could see compromising the movement of Macy Chiasson. And Macy's not the most effective with her boxing, like Mayra Silva's last opponent and last defeat, Raquel Pennington. And Raquel beat both these girls. And I think mainly where Raquel gave Mayra a lot of issues was not only just her size and strength in the clinch, but yeah, she's good in the clinch, but really good with her boxing as well, and her submission defense, and her takedown defense. And she was able to piece up Mayra Bueno Silva, but also that was Mayra's first fight, coming off the Holly fight that was overturned because, Mayra was on them ADHD meds, which, you saw it disapproved of. Those ADHD meds helped her keep that focus. But when she had to fight without them, it was a bit of an adjustment, whereas I feel like now she'll be used to fighting without them. I could see Mayra being a little bit more locked in, a little bit more focused in her last fight, and looking a little bit sharper than her last fight. And I think this will be the first opponent that Macy has fought in a while where she's not going to have a grappling advantage over. Usually, Macy Chiasson is the better grappler than most of her opponents, but Mayra Bueno Silva is very dangerous on the ground. And Macy Chiasson, whenever you do pressure her, whenever you do walk her down and you do start connecting on her, she does get uncomfortable and she likes to get you in the clinch to slow down your pressure or look for takedowns. And against someone like Silva, that could be very dangerous. And I just think Macy is more finishable than Raquel. She's not as durable. Her submission defense isn't as good. So I can see Mayra hurting Chiasson on the feet in the exchanges, chopping at the legs. But then I could also just see Macy Chiasson relying on the clinch a lot, risking playing the ground game with someone like Mayra Silva, and that might get her submitted. So I'm going to pick Mayra Silva to win this fight by submission. In the second round, I think Macy will do good a little bit early with her range, her movement, her physical presence, but once the low kicks start adding up, Macy won't be able to move the same. She'll start getting hit a lot easier, and Mayra Silva does hit pretty hard and hit pretty fast. So I could see her doing damage to the head of Macy Chiasson. Macy getting uncomfortable, and then she tries to wrestle Mayra, gets a takedown relatively easily, and then I feel like Mayra Bueno Silva off her back is going to find a sneaky submission, probably a leg lock. Or I would not be surprised if, like Holly, she gets a standing guillotine from the clinch. That could happen as well, but my pick is Mayra Bueno Silva. I could also see her investing in some nasty body kicks on Macy as well. She's tall, that body's open. Aldana finished her with a body shot, so yeah. And also, it's a 3-round fight as well, so even if Silva doesn't get the finish, I don't think she has to worry about cardio or pacing herself. She can go all out, so 3 rounds favors Mayra, and she just has more of a finishing threat in this matchup. So yeah, Mayra wins. Moving up the card, Anthony Smith versus Roman Dolidze. Really not much to talk about in this fight. I mean, this is short notice for Roman. He's not a 205er. Roman Dolidze is a middleweight, and this is just too short notice. I don't think he's ready. I mean, neither is Smith, but this is a very favorable matchup for a guy like Anthony to take on short notice. Alberg was a more dangerous matchup because of his striking, because of his power. Roman, not really known for his power or his striking. He's just very tough, and he's a very good grappler. But Anthony Smith is more well-rounded. He can also grapple. His takedown defense isn't the most consistent, but he's very good at scrambling, getting back to his feet. And his stand-up is way better than Roman Dolidze. So I'm going to say Anthony Smith will win this fight by being more well-rounded, defending takedowns, and piecing up Roman and probably winning a decision. I could also see him sneaking a finish in there as well. And then Brian Ortega, T-City versus Diego Lopes. This is a very interesting fight. This is a huge step up for Diego Lopes. But I don't want to say he's untested because he did fight Movsar Evloev, where he did very well in that matchup on short notice. If he had a full camp, he potentially could have won that fight. He had moments where he was landing big shots on the feet against Evloev and, also had some close submission attempts. And all around, I do think Diego is actually a horrible matchup for Brian Ortega. Because even though Brian is a very good, underrated veteran, and he's a guy that when you do count him out, usually he does turn up and he ends up winning. Like the TKZ fight, a lot of people wrote him off because he was coming off the Max loss and he hadn't fought in 2 years and Zombie was looking dangerous. Ortega outclasses him on the feet for 5 rounds. He was expected to lose to Yair. He comes back, submits him, gets his revenge in that fight. But I don't know. I don't see this being one of those moments for Ortega. I am going to have to go with Diego because this will be the first opponent that Brian will have fought where Ortega is not going to have a significant ground game advantage over. Usually Brian, over all of his opponents, is the guy with the huge jiu-jitsu advantage over. Although he couldn't sub Volk, he had that advantage over Volkanovski. He had that edge over Holloway, but he couldn't get the fight there against Max. He had that significant advantage over Yair. But Diego is very well-rounded. I think Diego has better hands than Brian Ortega. He's faster than Ortega. Ortega has power, but he's very slow, not the most accurate with his boxing as a guy like Diego Lopes. And I don't know if he'll be able to chin someone like Diego. I think on the feet, Diego can piece him up. And when it comes down to the grappling, if Brian wants to take the fight down, Diego can handle him on the ground. And Brian showed in that last fight against Yair, that tough chin just might be giving out. For the first time ever, we saw Brian get dropped in a fight. And if Yair can drop you, I can only imagine someone as powerful as Diego might be able to drop him. So sadly, I do think this may be the very first time where Brian gets TKO'd for real, not a doctor stoppage like against Max, but he actually gets stopped because Diego hits very hard. He's got good pressure, and I could just see Brian just getting lit up, overwhelmed. from that onslaught of flurries against Diego, and he's just not able to respond correctly. And I'm going to say Diego gets a standing TKO, flurry of punches against the cage in the first round. But I mean, if Brian Ortega can pull this off, I wouldn't be shocked. I just think this matchup, it's not good for Brian. It's just not a good matchup. Brian has a chance to win because he's a very tricky veteran. He's a guy who can definitely surprise people. Let's just say that. But yeah, he's not beating Diego on the feet and on the ground. I think Diego can handle himself like Volkanovski was able to. So yeah, Diego's my pick. Now the main event, Alex Poatan Pereira versus Jiri Prochazka. Man, I cannot wait for this rematch. Non-ideal circumstances. I don't know why the page just went to Jiri. But yeah, non-ideal circumstances for both men because it's short notice. You would like to see a rematch at this level, be a full camp where both guys are going to be at their best. But on the bright side, both these men, they've already fought each other before. They've already prepared for each other before. So they're just going to go based off the information that they already know. Even if it's not going to be the best version of Jiri or the best version of Poatan, they already have experience going up against each other. And honestly, I do think that this time around, this matchup might be even more dangerous for Alex because we're seeing an active Jiri. Like Jiri Prochazka going into that first fight was coming off, a year layoff, a shoulder injury. He was just getting back into the swing of things against a dangerous opponent like Alex. But now he's healthy, he's active. He just fought 2 months ago, same card as Pereira. So I do think that Jiri, I think he's going to be a lot better than he was in that first fight against Pereira. And honestly, this might be Yuri's best chance to win with it being short notice, with Alex having a lot of weight to cut and him just coming off of that tour in Australia where he was relaxing. Now he just has to switch back into camp. And weirdly, I can see this being a scenario. I could just weirdly see a reality where Alex loses this fight simply because he wasn't ready and he just wasn't prepared and they got to run it back and do a trilogy. However, Alex is just not a guy you can bet against. And I know I picked Jiri in the first fight, and he was doing well in that first fight, connecting on Alex, putting the pressure on Alex. But then Alex was able to keep his composure, and he was able to eventually catch Jiri with that pull left hook and get the stoppage. Early stoppage, that is. But still, Alex won the fight. I gotta go with Alex Pereira to win this time, even though I really want Jiri to win, and I think his chances are really good. Alex is a horrible matchup for Jiri Prochazka because Jiri is a guy who, even though he's a really good striker, he's really unorthodox, he's got good pressure, he does hit hard, he's very careless. And every fight he's getting banged up, every fight he's getting hurt. And usually it works for him. Usually he's able to walk through the fire in order to land his own shots. We saw this against Rakic. We saw this against Volkan and Reyes. He was able to take shots, come forward until he's able to find his own shots to get the finish. But Alex Pereira has the touch of death. They don't call him Hands of Stone for nothing. And he's just not a guy where you can just tough it out and walk through his punches and everything will be okay. If he hits you, you're going to go down. And the moment he hit Jiri clean, he dropped him and he finished him. And plus, I still feel like those calf kicks are going to be a problem, especially on short notice. Not enough time for Jiri to really adjust, make the adjustments he needs to beat a guy like Pereira or to properly prepare for those leg kicks. So yeah, I think Alex is going to take it. And I think Alex is going to stop Jiri Prochazka again. I think Alex Pereira will win. I could see him stopping Jiri in round 2 again, but I'm going to say the fight will probably extend one more round. Round 3, I think it will be a back and forth fight. I think Jiri will have success, but I think Alex is going to come in this second fight a lot more confident than the first fight because, going into the first fight, that was his second fight in the 205 division. But now Alex is fully grown into himself in this weight class. He's a fully developed light heavyweight now. We saw this in his last fight against Jamal Hill. And Alex is just getting better every fight, and he's evolving as an MMA fighter, and he's getting better with confidence. So with his confidence being up, I just think Alex is going to perform a lot better and just give a more decisive victory, you know? I think I can see why Alex wanted this rematch, to prove something, to prove that he is better than Jiri, because there's a lot of doubts going in this fight because Jiri was doing good. He was winning until the early stoppage, and I think Alex wants to shut all that down, and I think this time Alex will seal the deal with a more decisive stoppage. At 205, man, Alex is just a monster. He's got a good chin at this weight class. He took shots from Jiri. He proved he can take Jiri's best shots, but vice versa. When he hits Jiri, Jiri does not respond the same way. So if it comes down to it, to grit, toughness, Alex can take the shots when he needs to and keep that composure. And with Jiri being way too overzealous and the way he always overextends in his punches and relies on his chin, I just don't see that ending well for him in this rematch. So I'm going to go with Alex Pereira, round 3 TKO against Jiri Prochazka. But I do hope that Jiri wins, but I am excited for this rematch. It's going to be a good one. This just seems like one of those fights where they're just destined to meet more than once. Modern day gladiators, the samurai versus, I think, the native warrior. But that's it for my breakdown and prediction for UFC 303. Let me know your picks in the comment section down below. Will this be revenge for Jiri or legacy for LX? And still or and new, like and subscribe, and peace out.